All right. So a couple of days ago, made a video about, the cult of unhappiness. And, I think that's I think it's an easy thing to sort of misunderstand, what do I mean by happiness? What do I mean by unhappy people? And, it's, I'll try to explain a little bit more about what my, sort of thoughts are and what my, guiding principles are by how I, define and think about some of these things. But maybe I'll explain a little bit about, where, I first sort of what my influence is on how I view happiness. I have a close friend of mine who's sort of became like a mentor and a adopted father to me many years ago. And, back then I was, very much, very, intellect driven. Everything was through the filter of, mental logic. And, so when he first, sort of introduced this idea to me that happiness is a choice, I wanted to argue with it. Many people probably want to argue with me about this. But, there's, I think fundamentally the important distinction to make between, what do I mean by a choice for happiness? What does that mean? Or what do I mean by unhappy people? There's a difference between happiness itself, which is, it could be a bit of a nebulous statement because different people may call different things happiness. But, what I'm really talking about is not a particular state, emotional state, I'm not talking about being happy, all the time. What I'm talking about more is allowing happiness to be our guiding principle, to be the thing that we're looking for when we make our decisions, And so, it is one thing to be happy, it's another thing to choose happiness. And, this is where it's very simple, both very simple and but the mind wants to grab hold of these things and make them very complicated. And so the point is, one of the things that's important is, different things will make different people, happy. So, and that's a good thing. We want different people to do different things in the world. That's why we have, the various professions and disciplines and, arts, different arts, just different roles to fulfill in the world, because not everyone is designed the same, and not everything will give you the same amount of happiness. If everyone tries to be, a certain way, a few people will achieve happiness and many people won't, because it won't be the right thing for them. So the point is to choose happiness as a goal, and to keep your eyes open for what will bring happiness. And, what often interferes with that is this idea that unhappiness is somehow wiser than happiness. And, it's like people who are motivated by unhappiness are, often very convincing, and, they can have very good logic. But fundamentally, what they will achieve is more unhappiness. So, why listen to them? And, they tend to think in black and white terms, and they'll try to do, they'll try to push what is right for them onto others as what is right for, what everyone else should be doing. And, it's like spirituality, for example. Not everyone should be a monk, Some people should be a monk, because some people, it will actually, living a monastic lifestyle will actually bring them greater states of happiness, So there's, it gets kind of, tricky. But you can kind of tell, people who are like sort of committed to unhappiness and despondency, who want to sort of stay there, and they sort of want to manipulate and control other people and convince them to do something because that there is no other option. Because like their way is the right way, And you can tell like in the misery and how they live their lives and, what surrounds them and the people, the anxiety in their groups, in their families and, the falseness, you can sort of tell, when people are motivated by things that are not driven by the fundamental principle of, looking for happiness, aiming for happiness in itself, not some goal that is like, once I do this, then I will be happy. But, so yeah, it's not so much, it's not so much, when you have happiness as your guiding principle, the outcome of any given situation or any given goal is not as important, because you're not like tethered, you don't have happiness coupled with an idea of fulfillment within a certain, area or regard or material, reward. You're more like you're just aiming your, thrusters in a certain direction because it feels right to go for that particular fulfillment. So, it doesn't mean that you don't have a goal, but it means that your goal is not necessarily like what you, like if you don't achieve your goal, it's not like a reason to, go to despondency and despair, because, really what you're looking for is, self-discovery. Happiness is about self-discovery. It's about trying different things, and failure only means that, perhaps it wasn't the right thing for you after all, and you need to like recalibrate and go in a different direction, or that there's some other approach, that you've overlooked, and, maybe it's time to try something, try to achieve the thing that you want in a slightly different way, So happiness is all about sort of like opening our eyes to, what is available to us, to have a greater sense of like, what are the real options, Like if I'm, a slave or a prisoner, like Do I have to live, can I make peace with the fact that, okay, I am a slave and I'm in prison? Is there a way that I can, if that is the fact, is there a way that I can live my life in a way that is, makes me feel more empowered and more free than some of the other slaves and prisoners? You know what I'm saying? It's like, and so it's like availing yourself to like what your options are once you're, in whatever state you are. If you're in a state of unhealth, do you just like sit, back and say, well, fuck, I'm completely fucked. There's nothing I can do, like I'm unhealthy. I can't move. There's nothing I can do. Or, and then you allow yourself to like bow to unhappiness as this like sort of, this, reason to not look for anything more, and to give up, unhappiness is sort of like people feel comfortable with it because it sort of, takes away their choices from them. And then they can just say, let themselves be, at the mercy of outside forces and say, well, it's out of my control. I'm unhappy. I have no control. I have clinical depression, I'm fucked, so there's nothing I can do. But does everyone, let's say like you have two people with clinical depression and one of them just sort of resigns to the depression, and, they take whatever pills the doctors give them. And, they're just like, well, they just sort of like, it's almost like there's something like that giving up gives to them, like gives them some kind of comfort that they don't have to move any further. But, another person with the same diagnosis and maybe the same level of depression, they may, if happiness is their goal, they may begin looking for other options, things that they didn't consider, things that perhaps, not all the, that aren't like so easy and readily available and agreed upon by the mainstream. There might be other ways to raise your level of happiness. So, you could have two people with the same diagnosis and, one could be modestly happier than the other. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you're not completely, you always have options, you always have choices, and you can always improve your life and become happier, because happiness is sort of like, it's like a spectrum, there's like different levels of happiness. And it's this, and one of the great satisfactions in beginning to become someone who begins to choose happiness more actively is you get to have the satisfaction of that agency and power that, whatever the world gives you, it doesn't define you, but you are defining yourself, and you're taking control over your own body, your own soul, and your own mind, and you begin to discipline it. You begin to discipline it and to start to think in ways that are uplifting to you, empowering to you, and give you a sense that you are lovable, beautiful, magnificent, and strong, And whatever gets you, makes you feel more that way, you go more in that direction, And, anyone else, no matter how educated or intelligent they are, anyone who tells you that you don't have a choice and you don't have options, you have to do what we tell you to do, this is the diagnosis, you're fucked, don't listen to those people, because they don't really know. What we know is a drop. What we don't know is an ocean. And, it's really foolish to think that any person, you know, in our current era has some kind of cure-all solution or full understanding of, you know, the material world and the quote unquote hard facts of reality. You know, we're not anywhere near that. So any expert, they're only an expert of our current best understanding, and they may be a lazy expert and they may have not done the fucking research. And how many of those do you think there are? That's like the majority of people, you know, who become educated. You know, there's some people in the medical field, in the psychological field, who actually have a talent for, for psychology and for health. And then there's a shitload of people who just want to get their degree and they want to talk down to people, and they get annoyed when you go, into their office and you say, well, like I did some research, that may disagree with you, and those people will get incensed and they say, well, I'm the expert, you don't know what you're talking about. But, don't take that for granted, Do your own research, make your own choices, take responsibility for what you want. If unhappiness is what you want, then, for whatever reason, there are some advantages to unhappiness, just giving up, and feeling like it's hopeless. There's a certain comfort that gives to some people who just want to sort of lay down and not do anything anymore and feel like, it's out of their hands. That might be a reason to choose unhappiness, but if you want to be happy, then there's things that you can do to choose happiness, and you can really, and you are the ultimate authority on what it is that makes you happy. And what do I mean by, what it is that makes you happy? I mean, what feels right to you in your chest, in your heart, in your senses, in your nervous system, in your mind. What gets you excited, You don't have to believe anything. You don't have to believe anything at all that makes you discouraged and feel like less than or lower than, We're all fundamentally equal in the eyes of God, in the sense that we all have choice and we all have access, to our own spirit, and what is right for us as people, as individuals. And so, there's a lot of more layers to this that I could go into. I usually just like to speak off the cuff to, see where I go with things. Hopefully I did this, explained it a little bit more, a little bit better, create a little bit less confusion. But, my main point here is not really, it's my main point here is really what I'm doing here on YouTube is about my own personal growth and, desire to improve my communication skills. So, anyone who thinks that I'm like out here trying to be like something other than that, you've got the wrong idea. Anyhow, have a good one.